This is another message from the underground. The voice of Free Earth, brought to you by Paul Seals, straight from the source. You are here now with a special purpose to fulfill, and you are not alone. This is it, family. It's up to us. One planet, one spiritual source, in a multitude of forms. Stay human, protect the planet, raise the consciousness.
Hi guys, Paul Seals with another message from the underground, joining us today for the Actualising Independence series. We're going to be talking with Jason Reynolds about the liberation of love. Nothing is more destructive in life than our inability to receive attention. As the basis of all lives maintained tragedy is misunderstanding. Every war, every pain, every fear assumes there is only a right way and a wrong way. Opposition. Assuming what you knew is always true, and what now exists is not. An arrogance which never welcomes in an unmatched freedoms of resolved confrontation. A darkness liberated when you humble yourself to accept the supreme state of your resonant integration. If you're ready to move past the familiar and embrace a life unknown, one patiently awaiting to align with your courage to be the deliberate and deliberating influence, you join us as we explore the cornerstone of life's expression. Jason Reynolds, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Paul. It's a bit of a mouthful, that intro.
Yeah. It's very moving, and the liberation of love, we're going to be talking about that today. And I think we sort of always try to open up with the subjective interpretation of actually what is love.
I suppose it's an eternal question, but our freedom comes in our ability to understand and simplify what is complex, and that to me is a starting point of love. To me, the definition of love, quite simply, is attention without reason. And what this actually means to me is that in every particular part of life, when we have a reason, we're predicating, we're assuming where we're going to go. We look for safety before we actually start to take movement forward. And therefore, we continue to repeat our life and wonder why it is that we have certain things in our life that we don't want. We've seen it before. We're either bored of it, or we feel ashamed, or we just don't want that to be part of our own experience. So attention without reason is the ability to be able to go into a particular space, to be able to explore something, to discover in the freedom of coming to be able to interpret it for the very first time. And that happens a lot with, the people that are closest to us, the relationships. Just consider this, that is, we have a honeymoon period in relationships. And why is it we don't maintain this honeymoon period? It's because of a commitment that we're making to be what we're expected to be, if we haven't established that independence through that relationship to begin with. And that very much comes from within our own self, and that's to me another big part I want to go into today is understanding, because it's until we understand ourselves, how can we possibly expect in true, rightful form to have anyone else be able to understand or be able to appreciate us as we want to be, as we know ourselves to be, too often in silence. So attention without reason is that ability to go into discovery, to look at something in the very first time, that we change so much in every single day, let alone the biological, measurements that we can lean upon. What I'm looking at here is, as individuals, the way we perceive things, the way we see things, the way we experience them allows us to be different. And if we continue to look at those people around us as always being the same, and they're not going to accept me, or they're going to see me in this particular way, what we're not just doing there is keeping them boxed and keeping them judged as what they were. We maintain ourselves in that same relationship that we had with them back at that particular point that we haven't let go of. So discovery is, very much requires something called release, and this can go back to, common states of law. To release is to recontract, and we ultimately should be doing that at each and every moment of our life, that we let go of things as easily as we receive them. If we're not letting go of them, we'll continue to keep maintaining them as they were. And anything that's held, anything that's maintained or held and restricted, is it dissolves and ultimately it decays and falls away. Everything exists in our life because of the attention we give it. And this is, in more sexy terms that have taken out of the context of a dictionary, is attention is ultimately being given such things as life force. Now, when we project our attention into a space that has not formed as yet, we can create anything. But this is where love is lost, is when we get into the state of creating. We start to invite into our own space what other people will think. They might not even be close to us. They might not even be, in our life. They may have been someone from our past and a long time past. But as we start to move forward in a particular direction, we start to consider what John would think. I've never got past that particular part in the way I was dealt with at school and how I was seen. What would they think of me if I was to come out and start speaking in this particular way? And for many of us, we need to recognize in relationships, to be able to maintain a healthy relationship, is we need to be also equally able to let that relationship go at any particular point in time, not be restricted, not be maintained by that. It's as equal as we allow independence in ourselves, we bring it to the space of others.
It's interesting. And when you talk about attention, Jason, what does that actually look like as far as practice is concerned? I mean,
for sure.
Presence with another, presence with self.
Yeah, so I think presence and, the power of now, and there's a whole range of literature and, and philosophy that goes along, being in the moment, and that there's only this moment. If we were to focus upon being in the moment, we ultimately discount exactly what we're doing. There's many meditations, there's many orators and teachers that sit out there and talk about focusing on being present, when ultimately the opposite happens. You've got to create an environment where that's the only thing that does occur. And to me, it's about confronting the darkness, and ultimately at times that they don't need to be devilish by nature, or they don't need to be significant by nature. They can be just the things that distract us from what it is that we are not doing in our own life. So our attention and true attention, we've got so many adjectives to try and give power back to words, that when they stand in their own truth, and we accept them in their absolution, they are what they are. So attention means that we're not giving attention elsewhere. Attention is not, I'm listening. Attention is being very intent, not just on what the words that are being said, but feeling and holding space for whatever it is, whether it be a person interacting with you, whether it be an environment that you're holidaying in, whether it be a meeting that you're currently within. We've got to have the strength at times that if we're not providing attention to it, we've got to reconcile that within our own selves. Is this something I'm resisting, or is this somewhere I don't need to be? And for many of us, it's even challenging that if we're in a place where we don't want to be, but we think we should be there because it's someone's birthday or they've gone through something, and we don't want to be there, we all are so limited in the inability to have grace to be able to say to that individual, I'm going home. Or even the most simple thing within a relationship, I'm going to bed, without being able to gracefully deal with the objection that may come, well, why don't you wait for me? How come we don't go to bed together? These types of small aspects of our inability to express ourselves in those ways and be able to be truthful and authentic to ourselves is when we place attention upon something, it cannot help but grow. And the true fact is, if you're putting a lot of attention, or you believe you're putting a lot of attention into something, but it's not growing, the only truth that can be there is that you're not putting attention into it, you're being distracted, and the reasons for which you're doing it is being compromised because you're not there seeing exactly what exists, giving attention to it as it is in order to understand it before you can move past it. Because there's one fact that remains, and I would challenge this of anyone, is that until we understand something, we can't change it. And, for many of us, we look to try and change other people. We look to try and change environments. We look to try and change the government, the world. But if we don't understand it and we just complain about it, nothing will change until we take responsibility for where we are. And here's I suppose a deeper point, and for this, until someone accepts, I say this quite in a mischievous way, but it's an absolute truth. Some people still actually believe that cancer was something that was given to them, that came through hereditary genetics or their diet or whatever it may have been. Until we accept that we actually created that particular thing within us, we cannot change it. Until we take ownership over that, nothing will change. Whilst we continue to keep blaming the environment or the decisions of the past, and even what we were in the past, nothing will change. So, it depends upon when we come to attention, there's no fractions here. Fractions and separation of a truth is all about what the ego is. It creates an identity as an alternative to the reality. So when we start to say, well, I'm kind of, or I'm nearly, or I've done my best, if we've done our best and we are still not where we need to be, well, we need to find something more within us to move towards that particular outcome we're looking for, rather than continuing to keep doing the same and say, I did my best and complaining about it, or we need to change paths.
That's a great point. And I think you mentioned responsibility there as well. So can you just speak in a little bit more into that in relation to responsibility, like what the subjective interpretation of responsibility means for you, or looks like for people?
Yeah, I suppose
about actualizing independence here, right?
Yeah, I suppose initially in one of my, and we all have certain things that appeal to us, but responsibility, is often being said about it's the ability to respond. I think that's interesting, but it also is then reliant upon what is going on around us. It's not taking, true understanding of our own selves. What we need to understand is what it says in that word is our ability. We need to understand what we are. We need to understand what we are that is independent, individualized within us. And we can go to whatever degree we choose to find that. For some of us, that's a deep journey, because the significance of what we want to create, draws it out of us. As we want to have a significant impact, there is certain elements of us that are not aligned that we need to confront to bring back into alignment with what we are. But if we don't know what we are, we can't bring it into alignment. We then come into a state of comfort with the environment that exists around us, and we have this ability to respond. What we need to get to is a point of, well, how do I, without fail, with absolution within my own self, develop a level of discernment that I can communicate within myself, not occasionally, not when it's convenient, not in a moment of enlightenment, but by determined choice at any particular moment, and ultimately to be in that same maintained state of connection. How do I first do that? To understand myself, because once I understand my abilities, then I have the responsibility to respond to what it is that is true to me. Once I've seen the truth of what I am, I cannot deny that anymore. And this is where a lot of us get to that particular point of, a real example of love is demonstrated in expression. Authentic expression is a condition of the love that we have for ourselves, the attention that we're able to maintain upon ourselves without reason. Rather than, the normal predications here is that someone will look into themselves to give themselves love when something has gone wrong. And this is a condition of life. I mean, we had this little more than a year ago where there was fires running around this country and people started coming out and telling them what they should have done. Where were they prior to that? It's great upon reflection, isn't it? Where we've got this 2020 vision, but to be able to stand out and be forthright prior to there being any evidence is where we find bold expression, is where we start to speak into a space that is not yet understood by others. So for us, our capacity to express ourselves is what gives us ultimate freedom. When we are not thinking about what we should say is when we are present. When we recognize that when we are being ourselves in a moment, we don't reconcile the thing leading up to it. And many, look, I'll just call it in a nice way, well-intentioned practices that are generally out of, people having certain experiences that want to teach them to others, but don't recognize that people are different to them. That there's a deeper understanding here of the natural law that exists in every particular part of of life, and that follows the same thing. And everything has an awareness, it expresses itself, and it goes to a point of completion to only then become aware of itself again, to express itself, and then go through completion. And completion is that particular point where attention is now ready for the awareness. And when you have the awareness, you're now ready to move towards the expression without question, without compromise, without doubt or fear of how that will be done. And then we move into completion. And completion is the fact that it requires no more of my attention. I'm now ready and full in my attention for the next thing that is occurring. This happens in nature. You know, the way a tree grows operates in this very same thing. And it's these simplifications that when people come to understand that, they can get out of the, you know, I would say, as far as to say, devastating conversations of ignorance, where people get caught up in philosophies of what they think the right thing is to do by repeating certain quotes, rather than being empowered to express ourselves in that moment. Because our reconciliation and our resolution of life doesn't happen prior to the event. Many of us believe that to be the case, and we go through, I've got to do some work. I've really got to do some work on myself. I've really got to get over that thing. No, that's not the case, because that thing that's there in front of you, as soon as you change what you are in that moment and you resist taking the action, expressing yourself physically or verbally, you then change the very course of where you're at. It's the ability to act in an inspired state from what is coming through us in each particular moment that allows us to then recognize what exists beyond taking the action is what I need to resolve. And that, more often than not, is the receiving of creation. It is the confirmation that I have created and I have moved through. Most of us want to clear beliefs in our life, or buy into certain philosophies that keep us comfortable, because we've got to clear some beliefs in order to move forward. That's not the case. The belief only exists because you're not moving forward. When you move forward, that belief dissolves. It doesn't exist anymore as you've acted in opposition to it. So, you know, this may be sort of a space that is generally reserved for what people consider to be leaders. And, I couldn't step into that space. I'm not a creator. That's for other people to do. I can't remember her name right now, but the mother of the Kennedys, her focus was to raise world leaders as a mother. She didn't stand out there in the generation of being a mother and thinking that she was disempowered. She looked at that she wanted to create world leaders. So it's a particular individual where your particular fashioning of your life might be the most simple and basic thing that might not be written up in Business Review Weekly in how it's going to take over the world. This is about you as an individual being able to connect with that. But when you do that to the best of your capacity, and ultimately you allow that within yourself to be unique. Mm-hmm. You allow that within yourself to recognize that as I expose myself, I will find opposition, and I hope to find opposition, but I am recognizing of that opposition, because I'm now on course, because what I'm suggesting is causing people to oppose it. And look, this is an important point, because there's a lot of opposition that certain people that are discovering other truths in their life are finding from family and friends. That opposition is not someone attacking you. You can take it that way if you like, because you have this false ideal that people need to agree with you and be on the same page. But all it's exposing within you is that you don't really understand what it is that you stand for when you buy into the opposition that's presented to you. When you recognize and understand the journey that you've gone on, you will recognize through your own humility that you opposed all of these types of things, that you opposed many things, and you still do. But it's to recognize that when someone opposes you, they are seeking a deeper understanding. But for many of us, it's part of the travesty of the great things that we could learn in the first, 20 years of our life through, the confines of organized schooling. We've got to remember, it always sort of plays on me that, it was only in the 1930s that in the US that people were still held at gunpoint and forced their kids to go to school. This schooling is not something that's been there for the ages or is even required. The greatest teacher of any particular child is love. I mean, you give the attention to a child and you don't interrupt them. You stop projecting your unresolved stuff upon them and trying to protect them from life, trying to assume and inbuild fears into those children because you haven't had the courage to look at ourselves. That might be challenging for some people, but ultimately when we do get to that point of opening our heart up, we allow ourselves in that moment of release to go, yes, I I see how I've done that. And we empower ourselves to move through that. But for many of us, we have to wait until we're in pain, until we've, dropped down those structures of comfort that we've created in order to give ourselves the freedom to move through that. And sadly, that happens for a lot of people through disease, through dysfunction, through being bankrupt, through going through horrific, experiences and traumatic experiences of breaking a family apart. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it is true within the individual that that's the path they're taking. But here's a point that we must find within ourselves the capacity to start taking action when things are great. Because the apathy that's, become intrinsic within Australian society, and I would say the world round, is that when things are great, there's this concept that when I get to that place, when I have that relationship, when I have that wealth, when I have that, whatever it may be, that thing that is within us is giving us the encouragement from within that say that everything's great. Well, now it's time to move forward. But what most of us do is we blow the balloon up and we sit there thinking how great the balloon is. Eventually it goes down. And once it's gone down, we go, I better give it some more attention. The best time to give that thing attention is when it is at its peak. And I want to just give a little bit of a mathematical awareness here in the way in which our biology works in this space. Is when we are in a state of our highest recognition and absolution of expression of ourselves, there is only the unknown that exists in front of us because we haven't been here before. We're not going along the guidelines of life and the things we've done before that we've done wrong. We're going to try it a different way this time. We've moved through that, and we've got to a particular point that each of us has experienced at some point in our life where we're so overwhelmed with our own joy and humility and appreciation of our own self. Now, it's in the maintaining of that is confirmed when we continue to act from that place, when we respond to the fullness of our ability. And that is the greatest challenge that we have, that when we get to that place where everything is great, for many of us, because our audience is out there, not in here, we then start to go and share that. Look what I've done. I've gone and bought this. I've created that. This thing's great. And you want to tell everyone about what's going on. And the thing is, when we're in that space when there's nothing in front of us, there is no resistance. But this takes a bit of time and stepping to walk through. But once you can do that, the whole point of learning and truly learning, not through practices and such as NLP and these types of things bring certain awakening landmark for them. They bring a level of awakening, but it's got to come to a point of discernment within our own self that I do not rely upon a function outside of myself, that I start to recognize myself as the authority and I can see what is relevant to me in areas of life. So when I am in this heightened state, what I would suggest to you, it's 10 times easier to move forward, but it's 10 times harder to accept yourself in that movement forward beyond the beauty that you've just created, because the fear sets in of what I'm fearful of now losing. So we have this fight when we're in this open space where we're at the highest point of our expression, that, well, this is great. It's better than where I was. I don't know if I want to move forward. Well, what if I lose? What if I do it wrong? And this type of thought starts to step in rather than, hey, wait a second. The only evidence I have is everything I've created here right now at this moment. If I just continue to keep doing and observing the actions I've been taking up to this point and being present to myself, I recognize I've had to go through some dirt. I recognize I've had to, step out and be inconvenient and be not accepted by others, is then allowing me to move forward. But here's the challenge. What most of us feel safe with is we want to be able to touch things. We want to be able to feel things because we see ourselves. We'd like to maybe see ourselves as different, but we see ourselves ultimately in truth, beyond our conversations, beyond the regurgitating of certain literature. We see ourselves as physical beings. We might have had experiences of what we call intuition or our imagination, but ultimately we can talk about intuition as much as we like, but let's be real here. If we are not acting upon our own subtle awareness of things that are not formed but are only within our own self of the seed manifesting, we will not act. What will go back to the safety is, well, I've got this intuition that this might happen, but it's not until we get whacked over the head by life and go, oh, wait, I didn't realize that was happening. My bank account is empty. My partner's left. When did that happen? When did this problem come in my life that I can now feel? But there's a weird relationship of discomfort in our own tragedy and trauma that we've become so familiar with that we feel comfortable because we know what to do. We're at the bottom. I know what to do here. I've just got to get back in the gym. I've just got to start saving money. I've got to put myself out there. And we go through these particular conversations with ourselves. But there's a mathematical equation here that every step that we take when we're in our state of highest expression, every one step takes us 10 steps forward. And that is because we are creating it. We are defining it. We are the attentive being that is driving that, and we are not being interrupted. When we are at the bottom of that wave, when we're at the most familiar, the most painful, the least expression, the most disconnected from what we are, that is every one step, every 10 steps we take is equivalent to one. In the middle of that, at a state of our own integration, which we have to achieve first, which is for some people is enlightenment. And that's a form where we are integrated as a physical and energetic being as one entity. This is where we have foregone the ideas of what exists out in space, alien races, every particular philosophy, insight, 5D, and the fears that come from 5G and all of this type of stuff. And we've taken our attention away from all of these things that seem intriguing, and we bring it back to our own point of understanding. We recognize all of those things were just a manifestation of our own misunderstanding of ourself. And when we come to that state of integration, we can start to create from that. That is where we start to actualize our independence, and we start to create what it is that we are here for. And talk about, if individuals want to change the world, this is where they change the world, is by pure example of what it is that they are creating, that other people believe it can be seen, that they're not sitting in the fear. If I step out, people won't like that. My friends won't accept it. It'll offend these people. And you know what? People are waiting to be offended. The very nature of life is offense gives people permission to actually express themselves in ways they have not. You see someone when they're offended, it's like, well, fuck you, and it comes out.
It's funny when you said that. I had a visual of like, offensive anonymous or whatever, like people sort of sitting around waiting to be offended.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But the thing is, let me just suggest this in the way I look at things, is that everything exists to support us. So when you meet someone who is obnoxious, that is not who they are. That is what they have become in the search for what they are, with maybe, not the right support around them. But someone who is obnoxious needs someone who has the capacity to express themselves gracefully and freely, to make them aware of the impact that they're having upon others, because I'd suggest that person's obnoxious would go home in their own time and reflection and judgment of themselves as to why it is that they're not accepted and loved in the way that they'd like to be, because many people who are obnoxious are not even aware of that's how they speak. Many people are not even aware of it.
To others.
Sorry?
Or they're not aware of that's how they occur to others.
Well, exactly. But the thing is that at that particular point, Paul, that individual, we need to be taught these things, that as we go through life, there's a certain reconciliation that we need to go through, that the first part of our life is the journey to our own independence, where we can start to express ourselves freely. That's what freedom is. It's not just the actualization of our own independence. It's the freedom of accepting others' independence, because we're engaged in our own. So when someone is, obnoxious in that particular way, they become liberated when someone has the love, enough love and care to be able to realize they're probably going to find some opposition to what they're about to suggest. But grace is not expressed in a way to those particular individuals in a nice tone. It's not by using certain words that bring comfort. Grace is the ability to be able to deal with, without influence, without reaction to the impact of what it is that you say. It's your ability. Grace has got nothing to do with, whether you're swearing or whether you're speaking in a particular way. Grace is all about my ability to continue forward in my own authenticity and truth beyond my expression. And, for many of us, we've got to, I suppose, realize that, we can either look at life as, that it's here to test us, or that it's here to support us, but we just don't yet understand how we will be supported. And this is, I suppose, a little bit of the conversation we've had in the past of, knowing and understanding and that distinction. And, maybe it'd be good.
Yeah, the difference between knowing the path and walking the path, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, excuse me for 1 sec.
No, that's okay. And that sort of leads me into the next question, and it's in relation to, pretty much what is love. And my background, I do some stuff here and there as far as music's concerned as well, Jason. And fundamentally, I heard a tutor break it down and say that basic music and songwriting, etc., comes down to that everything's about love or the absence of love. But let's talk about the absence of love.
Well, look at music. Look at how many people in music, and look, I'm by no means a great musician, but I know a lot of musicians, and I in speaking to them, talking about how, all the riffs have been taken and everyone's done it, and there's no new music that can be created, and there's life confirmed. That particular individual is not going to find something that is new and different, because it's about that unknown discovery that going into it, well, there must be something here. So I'm going to start going down a path and give this path attention without reason, because I'm looking to discover. Sorry, Paul, can you say the question again?
I'm just talking about in relation to, we were talking about music, and everyone has a different context or a different experience of what love is. And we're talking about, it's either the presence of love or the absence of love, or what is the opposite of love?
I'd say the opposite of love is indifference. Hate has some real beauty, and in hate is a part of it and a recognition of the ability for one. If we were all aware that in order to grow, and when we've been stagnant for some time, think of a pond, in a beautiful location, and it's stagnant, it's got moss growing in it, it's got gunk, and it can be in the most serene location, but it's not appealing. You're not going to jump in that water. But to be able to clean that, you have to get rid of the gunk that's obviously there, the scum that sits on the top of it. Hate is, in the process of going through hate, is the first part of liberation, to recognize how much hate I do have. And what really hate is a discord towards things that you don't understand. There is nothing that is not healed through understanding. Every relationship that exists at this particular point in time that is not in alignment, and whether that's in a family or beyond, whether it's a country's, it's because they choose to not understand, and understanding is the precursor to taking action. And I mean true action, not reaction, not things we've done before. And so, well, I tried that. That's not action, that's reaction. And we've got to be able to discern the difference in our own life, how much I'm actually reacting compared to how much action I'm actually taking, based upon, did I come to a point of understanding? And from that understanding, I'm now free to act in a way which might be with an individual that you've been in opposition with for a long time, to hug them and say that you love them, where you've never done that before. And it might be a common thing with others, but with this individual, you've never been in that space. So hate itself is not the opposite of love. Hate is a pathway that starts towards love when we recognize that we have it, because until we recognize and accept the fullness of our hate and the depth of it, we're not going to come to the realization of how ridiculous it is that what we hold and how imprisoned we are by what we assume other people to be or other environments to be. And then, the influence they have upon us. So the opposite of love is indifference. And that's ultimately a choice to do nothing. That's ultimately, it's a deep level of apathy that someone else will work it out, that life doesn't require me, that my opinion is not important, that what I have to contribute is not required. We are all here for our own existence, and some of us live that in our own way and others live it in other ways, but far too many people are living it in a place of identifying what other people need to do, and generally in opposition to what they're actually doing themselves. So, and we've got to bring about peace. And I mean, you look at the media, for example, look at government.
I prefer not to, where I can help it. Yeah,
I mean, I think it was about 10 or 12 years ago that my mum came into my place, and I said that, that wasn't going on in the house. And there was quite not a conflict, but there was obviously disappointment. But the thing is, you still become present to it. In life, I'm not sitting there watching the 6 o'clock news and never will, but there's information that comes from a broader, aspect of life into my attention.
Yes.
So the thing is with media is that most people are confined by the way that they believe that they should act, and media runs on that. Media continues to keep relating to you that you need to be compassionate, you need to be nice, and a very wise man that we both know, Max, told me what nice means at its basis. Nice is to remain stupid and uninformed. That's the basis of the word nice, and it's to not rock the boat.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you there for a sec, Jay. So I was just going to say there's a lot of people out there in the world at the moment that are trying to be responsible. They're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to, wear their face masks, well, triple masks if you're in the States at the moment, wear their face masks, get their vaccination because they want to be good and nice people.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's sort of, nice has been thought of as it's a common action. It's the right thing to do, and this is where the media and government and all these things play upon that idea that you've got to toe the line. You've got to, we're in this together. And I think we've spoken about this in previous conversations that to me, one of the most evil things upon this earth at the moment is community and the concept and miscommunication of what community actually is. And, a common unity, which other people, cleverly, change the word to be. Yes, a unity not in actions and expressions, but in truth, in towards creating an independence, which means, maybe for some, a complex way, it's an acceptance of difference, not a continual predication of the same over and over again, that we've got to agree on this before we go forward. It's through robust conversation. And we've all had those moments where like, wow, what an amazing person or a conversation I've just had, because we've gone into places we haven't been before. But when we're talking, there's not too many times we have a chat about the footy that we become so excited and intrigued by life. It's a deeper space within, that, for us to look further into.
Because the things as well, Jason, I mean, we've all sort of experienced some form of trauma in some way, shape or form. We've all experienced some trauma. It's just how we've chosen to deal with it. But let's talk a little bit about like why people choose to attack, or what is the response that has people attack other people, whether it's physically or verbally, or we're all aware of the travesties, particularly with technology at this point in time, of the travesties that exist in the world. Why is it that people attack other people?
Well, I think we'll go back to the very beginning that, from a young child, we seek attention, and it's there's different degrees of it. But once you're attentive, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're taking your son to a fun park, or whether you're just sitting there drawing, or you're just sitting next to each other and you're present to each other's existence. People seek attention. And for many of us, the schoolyard, you're an attention seeker. You're just doing that to get attention. And we've been taught, in many ways, that's a bad thing.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people probably incarcerated that are have developed that pattern of attention seeking through negative responses.
Yeah, and look, when those individuals get attention, I mean, you can develop a relationship over 20 years with a family member or a friend, but then you can develop within an 8-week period, that I see happen so often with what we do, a level of attention that is availed to people because they open themselves up, where the relationship that they can create can be far greater than anything that they have ever created over the existence of their entire life. So the reason why people are attacking, in my understanding of it anyway, is that people attack you because they have lost the capacity to ask for assistance, to ask for help, to expose themselves, because what the truth is, they don't understand what they are. And therefore, they can't go in a meaningful and a deliberate way to someone else. Can you help me with this? Hey, this is what I want. This is what I am. And this is why I exist. And it doesn't need to be coming to a deep realization. But imagine if the first 20 years of schooling, people were given all of that time to patiently consider all of the things that they love and what they don't, and to explore each particular side of them so that they could actually move through, and through life that they could communicate freely and openly with people from a place of personal understanding, because then they could communicate very openly, oh, well, that's not for me. But not from a place of, I don't like that and being reactive, but from a place of wisdom, from a place of awareness. So the reason, and it might be just a tip for some people that are getting attacked by other people in their circle, and their family, and it might be hurtful for many, is the ability to be able to just hold space and just to be able to provide attention to that person, because that person that you know and that you love and you've come into a relationship at whatever degree, that is not who they are. That's not what you know them as. But to recognize within yourself, this person trusts me enough to be able to be vitriolic, to be able to let go of this deep toxicity. And I'm playing a role at this particular point. I'm not going to tell them what to do. Worst possible thing we could all do is when someone hasn't actually asked you or actually seeked your guidance and assistance, that you start telling them what to do. Let alone do you have an impact upon them that is not great. But what you end up doing is you have this energetic exchange where you take responsibility for everything that's unresolved within them, and you walk away feeling tired, run down. And many people who want to help others have this experience that no matter how much they do in their own life, they continue grinding and hustling forward because they're carrying the weight of everyone else's unresolved stuff, because they've wanted to step in and change their life when they haven't actually requested that. So we need to recognize that when people are screaming and shouting, if we don't make them wrong, we've got our own boundaries that, look, I don't appreciate that. The first time, the second time, but I don't appreciate that. And look, if you want to speak to me like that, you want to speak to me, you're probably going to have to look at a different way of doing it, because I can't keep receiving that unless it is something that you're working through and you're present to that. But if you're putting this at my feet, that nothing will change, not for me, not for you. And to show love in that particular place is to stand up with grace and be able to say that, to be able to deal with the consequences that come of you speaking your truth. So we're going to recognize that at every stimulation of growth, it is not possible to grow in life unless we go somewhere that is unfamiliar. And for some of us, in our own, some may call it tragedy, we have learnt love or attention through violence. We've learnt attention through passive-aggressive behavior. We've learnt attention through blame. We've learnt attention through judgment. We have learnt it in so many ways from those that have been closest to us in those formative years, that we have then taken them on. And that's how we've learnt to receive that. The guy that's in jail that's done a horrific act, when that person gets attention and understanding and is able to work through those things that have become so tragically held onto within them, because for one simple practice that I believe would liberate everyone is a simple understanding, something we teach as a I don't say as a responsibility, but as an absolute importance, is many people want to go into this state of wisdom. They want to be able to understand the depth of life and its existence, and get caught up in, falsities like chakras and philosophies that what people once had that meant something to them that they're still buying into now. I mean, this type of discord is about us standing on our authority and moving past that. But it's for each of us, to be able to express ourselves truly, to move into that particular place. We've got to have enough love within our own self to be able to receive that unfamiliar space, that when we go into growth, we have to go somewhere that's unfamiliar. We cannot grow by going somewhere that is familiar. We only confirm where we already are. It's through growth that we must go somewhere that is unfamiliar. And if we're present, and this is another key part of that takes people out of presence, because I have this experience of coming into this peaceful, state of ease, and wow, I can really feel the earth moving through me. But for me to actualize that and start moving forward, I have to let go of the things that have got me to this particular point, the scaffolding of my life. I have to let go of that. And sometimes letting go, people have not learnt to do that, and it becomes traumatic. I don't want you to go. I want you to be here. I need you, because we haven't actualized our own self and how to actually move through that. We've got to go into those unfamiliar spaces. So learning, as a primary thing, how to actually release and let go. And for many of us, that is where our presence is lost, because we have this, blissful experience, and it's amazing. And I want to go back in there again, and like a drug, we want to get that same high again. We want to get drunk again and have that same fun night. New Year's Eve repeated over and over again, trying to recreate that most amazing night, but we're chasing it. So if we come to recognize within our own self, and from a state of humility, wow, like I've had this amazing experience and look at what it's brought to me. But what I don't understand yet is how to move through it. And if I don't understand how to move through it, I'm not also then aware of the challenges that will come. I'm also not aware of the difficulty that I may face. I'm also not aware of the toxicity that I may release clumsily as I progress towards a greater state of awareness. So it's these types of things that we need to begin at a starting point. I may want to experience wisdom. I may want to have deep conversations, but I also need to have the humility to release what it is that's going through. And this can be done in a 5-minute practice each day. The most challenging part of this is when things start going well in our life is maintaining it. And that's the same as why people don't step out of their comfort zone that people talk about, their state of familiarity, because once they get to a place where they're resolved and everything seems to be well in life, they tend to stop doing the thing that got them there in the first place. The gym membership that, as soon as people start acknowledging how good your abs are looking or your bum's looking a little bit tighter, it's at that particular point that people start to not have the time to keep going, because they feel like they've achieved the attention that they were seeking in the first place that they weren't getting, because they had a little bit of an extra roll of fat on their belly.
Well, it's interesting that you say that as well, Jason. You were talking about that as well, and that's the thing as well. I mean, as much as a lot of people have experienced some very difficult and extenuating circumstances in 2020 or still experiencing it at the moment, interesting enough and funny enough, there's a lot of other places, including places like Southeast Queensland where we're based, is that they're actually experiencing booms at this point in time. So it's true with what you're saying, like having an experience of people sort of doing it exceptionally well, and then sort of feeling as if they need to sit back and now they've made it, or that's the destination, and the complacency that some people end up finding themselves in and slipping at a even faster, greater rate than what they probably normally had if they just would have been progressive.
Well, yeah, I think, Paul, it's very, not saying any of this is easy. I would suggest that once it's understood, it's simple. And once people do anything and they've moved through it, jumping off a cliff or whatever it may be, it's like, oh, geez, it's not as hard as what I thought it would be. Writing that letter, having that conversation, making that phone call. It's never as hard as what we thought it was. And in the liberation of taking action, when we express ourselves, we experience love. And it's our ability to be able to maintain that and continue to express ourselves. Where we become most confronted is now when we've moved into this new place to continue to keep expressing ourselves, because we're now out on our own. We don't have those familiar, let's say scaffolds that are keeping us, in the place where we were before. It's, one of the things that we started to talk a bit before about knowing and understanding.
Yeah.
This is, an offshoot or a residual impact of the way in which we have been schooled, is to know something is important. And knowing very much is a predication of what I would suggest the ego and the identity. And what knowing does is create conversations. And conversations are very important, and knowing is important as well. But if knowing doesn't lead to understanding, we don't engage in a state of integration where we are acting in a way that is true to us. Many of us stop at the point of knowing. I know that. Yeah. I can repeat that and go, no, but the reason why that's happening to you is because of this. You need to look at these things. Well, that's all well and good, but until we actually understand how to do that, every great idea that is brought to being is because someone had the confidence, someone had the courage to step into a place that was unknown to bring it into form. Every business, everything that exists once existed in our imagination. And, us as allowing ourselves to be integrated. And what I mean is, I say again, the physical and the energetic operating as one entity. What happens when the physical and the energetic are not operating as one entity? We create the mind. People talk of the mind, body, and spirit. It's a confusion of New Age philosophy. The mind is what exists in the confusion of what was when we are not present to what is right now. So the mind is of no use. It is a servant to us, not something that we need to aspire to. But logical type teachings uses such things to manipulate the mind by methods, by modalities. And these are the things that when we start to liberate ourselves, we move past. And, it's crazy how simple that is, but it's what most of us are learning these days have been the complexities and the breaking down of those types of, teachings that are simple.
Yeah.
Go back to the law of the land, but knowing and understanding is recognized that I am understanding when I'm in the process of now taking new action. If I'm continuing to do it the way that I was, it's that I don't understand it. When someone suggests to you, drink beetroot juice to overcome cancer, or they say, do this particular process and you'll never ever experience it again. The opposition that comes, and no, that sounds crazy, and the opposition that's there, if we're suggesting something to someone and we just want them to agree with it to us, we're sitting in a place of, our own ignorance. What we need to recognize, what we're presenting is something that's different. And of course, if someone is truly engaged with what you say, they will oppose it because their opposition is that first step towards understanding it. It's the ability of those people that are strong enough to and have the courage enough to look into things that are different, that might not be down the main line, but actually have great impacts and results on life, is about that individual taking the responsibility, their ability to respond to their ability.
Yes.
By learning and being able to express to someone else so they can understand, because we don't understand something until we can allow someone else by their own actions to understand it through our own teaching. And, the best example we have of that is ourselves. We're a work of art. And to come to recognize the depth of what we are is not something that flashes in between our own life through, a meditation or through, a cacao ceremony. These are additions. We need to recognize that we don't want to become relevant in life if we become influenced by doing marginal surface level ceremonies along the way. We first need to come to our own point of relevance. And this is where love truly exists, is when we accept the significance of what we are and we are able to speak of our brilliance without making other people feel bad about it, but as an example to it, and recognizing that as we start to poke our head out of the hole and go, well, this is who I am, this is what I'm about. Many of us get whacked down like that beaver thing, with in the arcades.
Yeah.
And we go, well, I don't want to do that again. Look, last time this happened, look, I'm not prepared to do that again. And it's the misunderstanding as to why we experience that opposition. It's like in, years ago into sales, I remember, people always say, but they said they're not interested. Well, people cannot possibly be not interested if they haven't first considered owning. That they have to first, so they can't oppose something if they haven't considered what you're saying. And at times I've got close to my experience, other family members that have, a very challenged and disparaging relationship with their children, which is harmful and hurtful to all involved. No one's happy. But the thing is, one part of them are expressing themselves, from a very, misunderstood, or you could say wounded space. And the other is trying to tell them what to do. Whereas we've got to recognize that when people are doing that is because they're seeking attention. They actually respect you, but it's a matter of allowing them to get past and blow out all of the cobwebs so you can get to that particular point. And that's where you're going to be challenged into what degree of love that you have for that individual. But more so, how recognizing you are of your own journey that you've gone through to get there, because many people quickly forget when they get to their own liberation, how they actually got there, what actually they went through. And to be able to observe that in others is where we can become free in ourselves, because we don't take it personally. We recognize that, wow, hey, this person's actually engaged. They're actually moving forward. And to celebrate that, rather than to celebrate it when the rare opportunity that people get to the end of that and life is great. And then suddenly everyone wants to flock around them and go, wow, look at what you've done. Look at what you've created. The real love exists in our ability to hold attention and space without interruption, to people that are going through and find the trust to express and get rid of their toxicity.
Yeah. That's great, Jason. We're getting close towards the hour there as well. So thank you for everyone that's listening. But I just wanted to say in closing, I know you've had a lot of people reaching out to you in relation to what you provide and the courses and that sort of thing that you do. How do people find and get in contact with you?
Yeah, I work with an organization called the Quantum Movement, and our focus is personal governance. It's awakening independence. And it's not about a methodology or a philosophy. It's about creating a space where people can discover their own. We have very definitive practices that people go through that are simple. And I would suggest to you, if I went through them with you now, they would be dismissed because they are so simple. But the thing is, they align with what our life is. They're not a complication and a complexity of these ideas and what someone once visualized in a plant ceremony. This is about working with the deep functions that already exist within our own self. There is a great wisdom, and I'll say this, that many people talk of meditation, but meditation has been stripped in so many different ways. Meditation at its deepest form and the practice of it. I mean, we meditate when we drive, we meditate when in the shower. That's why we get a lot of this information coming through to us, because we are predisposed and we are sitting unconsciously, allowing ourselves to absorb what is coming in around us, and we're present. It's a form of meditation, but deeper forms of meditation where people start working with energy, there's so much danger that exists within that because people don't understand what they're dealing with. It can feel good. It's a temporary hit. But what I'd suggest, a much deeper form of meditation, and one that you can do at any particular time, is with a pen and paper. It is impossible to think, to engage the mind. It is impossible to be doing something different with your own attention when you are writing. And that is a great doorway for people to consider, well, why is that the case? Why is it that when I'm writing, there's nothing else that I can be doing? I'm engaged in that. And immediately you bring attention to yourself, you bring integration to yourself. The key is, well, what do I write? What am I going to write? What's the purpose of that? And so I suppose a lot of what we share is for people how to create the space for themselves so that they can go into the acceptance of their own significance, not temporarily, but as a lifestyle, and not in a whole course of, I'm going to go and do this week and see what this is. We've got to come from a point of, I don't know if maybe I'm different, Paul, but I ever had that person that sat me down, generational wisdom that said, this is what you're about. This is how these things work. This is what these functions are within you. These are the experiences you're likely to have. And to be able to actualize myself and stand upon a platform of someone else's liberation. So, yes, how do people get in contact? I have a tendency to go off in a direction.
It's great. It's great. So people get in contact with you and any of our listeners for
the best form
clients for them.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Best form at the moment is through the Quantum Movement Facebook page. If people want to know a little bit more, it's not something we enforce upon anyone. This is about people making a choice to move forward in their own life, and the right ones are ready, and others will be at another time. I mean, whatever it may be. But to just go onto our Facebook page and just go to the send message at the top. Just, people listening here, put in MFTU for messages from the underground, and just so we know where that message is coming from. And we've got an introductory journey that we're starting I think within the next month or a couple of weeks. But yeah, there's more information that will be there for that. But thank you for asking.
Yeah, beautiful. So we're getting close to the end of the series. It's an 8-part series, so we've got another series for next week as well. So thank you for everyone for listening. Jason, thank you again for your time. Thank you for this uncommon conversation that we're fortunate enough to have. And thank you for everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for everything you're doing to, again, create this space and move it forward. But, until we meet again on the inside,
okay.
Enjoy you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jason. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another message from the underground. Want to know more? Head over to Facebook and search for our private Facebook group, Messages from the Underground, or visit www.messagesfromtheunderground.org. To connect with Paul Seals, please visit paulseals.com. Stay human, protect the planet, raise the consciousness.